Hello and welcome in for another episode of Below the Rim Basketball. I am your host, Quinn Carey, and if you are joining me here today on YouTube, thanks so much for being here. I really appreciate it. Make sure you throw this channel subscribe, give this video a like, and comment below or comment on a previous video. I'd love to hear from you guys. Would love to get some feedback on some of my crazy takes and just get some opinions on some of the topics that we're covering from you guys. So make sure you do all that for this channel, and we're going to dive right into it. With the biggest news of the night in our hoops world coming last night with the Michigan Wolverines, the new men's national champions after 37 years, defeating the UCONN Huskies 69-63, putting a cap to their absolutely dominant 2025-2026 season, which started with an absolute 40-point bludgeoning of Gonzaga early on in the year, ended with this magical NCAA tournament run, defeating the Connecticut Cockroaches, as I saw them called on Twitter, because those guys just don't die. Danny Hurley's squad, always going to fight to the end, but Michigan did enough to put them away and earn their first national championship in 37 years. So major congratulations to Michigan and head coach Dusty May with his first national championship and his second Final Four appearance. Of course, a couple years ago, making that run with FAU to the Final Four, this time getting back there with Michigan and finishing the job, getting all the way to the championship game and winning in, despite the score, pretty dominant fashion. I thought Michigan controlled that game early on. It was a little bit back and forth in that first half. UConn, took a little bit of a lead. I believe it was up to 6 or 7 at one point there in the first half. And then really that hook and hold flagrant foul call on Caravan in the first half for UConn, I thought really shifted the tides. UConn went from up 2 in that possession. That foul call happens. They make their free throws. Michigan gets the ball back, gets a bucket. I believe Yaxel Lendenborg followed it up with a dunk, a stop, and then a dunk on the following play to go up 4. And then after that point, it just felt like Michigan took total control back over, again, with the way that UConn shot it, particularly there in the second half. Just never really felt, despite the little mini runs that UConn made, never quite felt like they were really going to challenge and have a shot to win that game, particularly late. I believe it was a Caravan turnover down 5. Had a chance to cut it to 2 or 3, and that turnover led to a Michigan bucket, went from potential 2 or 3 point game to 7 with about 3.5 minutes left. So I really thought at that point it was okay. Any UConn comeback has been stifled. It's not going to happen. At that point, it was just felt like a matter of covering point spread at that point. So, which UConn did cover their 7.5 point spread. So kept it close, just not quite enough to get over Dusty May's squad. The 5 transfers for Michigan proved to be the way to go for Dusty May. And this could be, we are already seeing the NIL take over with the transfer portal, all that stuff. But 5 brand new starters for Michigan, all transfers. This could be the new formula in college basketball. Hand select your team, particularly for these bigger Power 5, Power 4 conferences, to be able to hand select your team, get veteran guys, don't rely on the underclassmen as much, rely on veteran proven players who a year from now are going to be playing pro in Europe, playing pro in the NBA, and load your roster up with guys like that, guys that can make an impact from the portal. And that is the formula for Michigan, and it paid off for them big time in big ways this year. And major shout out to Dusty May. I don't know if he gets the national credit that he deserves on a national scale, because people just don't know him that well. Coming from Florida Atlantic, everyone remembers that Final Four run that they made, but then they were kind of forgotten about the following year, and people move on to the next hot thing. And so I think Dusty May, has kind of under the radar made his way to be one of the best college basketball coaches in the country, definitely one of the best young college basketball coaches in the country. And I think last night showed that we could have a little bit of a potential budding rivalry on our hands going forward in the coaching space with Dan Hurley at UConn and Dusty May at Michigan. I just think those are, obviously, given the fact that they're playing in the national championship game, just 2 of the absolute best that college basketball has to offer. Hurley needs no explanation. 3 national championship games, 2 national titles here in his short tenure at UConn. And now Dusty May, 2 Final Four appearances, one of which coming with Florida Atlantic, which that doesn't get talked about enough. And now a national championship with Michigan, and just a masterful job recruiting this roster, getting them to play together, getting those 5 guys all coming from different programs to buy in to the team aspect that he had created. And man, they just grind you freaking down. They are just elite defensively, just rotating body after body in, big bodies, big wingspans, tough to score against, perimeter defenses, scrappy and tough on the guards on the perimeter. and good luck getting in there against Mara and Lendenborg and Johnson. I mean, it just felt like every single shot that UConn was taking, even when it wasn't getting blocked, either they were getting blocked a handful of times, or it just felt like every single shot was impacted. I thought Reed had a lot of great looks around the basket that he normally converts, but having to get it up over 7'2" Mara totally alters the shot. There's a handful of air ball floaters from Braden Mullins, just something you're not used to seeing, which was totally impacted by the size and the length inside from Michigan. So just an absolutely dominant defensive team, and then felt just as dominant on the offensive end. This game, they did not hit their shots. Neither team could really shoot it. This was your good old-fashioned rock fight, slugfest, whatever you want to call it. So neither team could really see it go in from three, but after Michigan hit a couple there late, really pulled away, and they really didn't need it. Did a great job of attacking the basket. I thought particularly in the second half, shots hadn't been falling, and instead of just continuing to settle early in the second half, they attacked UConn. They were getting out in transition, ramping up their defensive pressure so that they could get out and get themselves easy ones. So again, just an absolutely dominant performance. Yaxel Lendenborg obviously did not look like he was 100% at all, but still just an awesome player. You could see the impact that he has out there, even moving. It almost looked like he was moving, particularly in that first half, 50-60% of what we've seen. Still able to make an impact, still draws the defense on his drives and attacks. Thought he settled a little bit too much for outside jumpers and threes early. He was probably feeling some of that lower body injury that he had been dealing with. But in the second half, I thought he was putting his head down, getting out in transition, impacting the game on the defensive end. And again, just the overall depth from Michigan and the size was just too much for UConn to deal with. So again, as I said, I think that hook and hold call on Caravan really changed the tide in the first half. And then from there, to start the second, Michigan just came out with more energy, better execution. Again, they weren't settling for as many long jumpers as UConn does. UConn is a jump shot shooting team this year with all their screens and staggers and things that they set. They're looking to get their jump shooters involved. And Michigan wasn't settling while UConn was missing shots. They were putting their head down, attacking the paint. Elliot Cadeau was masterful in the second half there, so crafty, so smart with getting guys in Michigan, solo ball, Demery, who were already in foul trouble, so crafty, just ripping the ball through, little things like that to get them their third, fourth, fifth foul eventually for Demery, and just put a ton of pressure on the UConn guards to where it just felt totally out of sorts for UConn, a team that kind of does that to other teams throughout the season. They felt like they were totally out of sorts, fouling more than we'd seen, and turning the ball over at a crazy clip. At one point, they had as many turnovers in the first half as they did in all of their game against Illinois in the previous round. So again, just an absolute dominant performance from Michigan. And just going back through my notes here, really wasn't a ton of other, the solo ball, bank three with 37 seconds left. That felt like it was about to be, oh my goodness, here we go, another UConn last second comeback. They're going to do it here. They're turning up the pressure. Michigan gathered themselves, gained composure, got the ball over half court, made their free throws, and just was never a doubt from there. So again, congratulations to the Michigan Wolverines. Awesome game, awesome season. Again, I think that teams are going to look, particularly those Power 4 teams, they are going to look at how can they recruit a roster of 4 or 5 transfer veterans that they can bring in to try and get together for 6, 7, 8 months, get them to gel, and then see what they can do in the postseason. I think for a lot of these teams, that type of formula is not necessarily going to be easy early on in the season. A lot of that can take some time to mesh. But I think down the road, when you get to tournament time, I think we're seeing having that depth, having that veteran experience, having guys that have played in big games, not necessarily at the school that they're at now, but in big games where they were maybe the man or one of the top 2 guys at another school now come in, being the 3rd, 4th, 5th option on a national championship contender, to be able to have that experience at a guy that is not one of your top 2 or 3 players is just immensely valuable. Can't be talked about enough for teams like Michigan. So I think we're going to see teams trying to copy that model as best they can. And we've already started to see this trend. There's always been the trend of dominant bigs in college basketball being a huge factor for teams. But I think we're going to continue to see that. I think, honestly, between Dusty May's run with FAU, he had his 2 bigs there, Vlad Golden, and I'm spacing on the name of the other guy on that team. But now here with Michigan, with just the 2 big lineup, and really it feels like 3, 4 bigs with the size of some of their wings and perimeter players as well out there. So I think we're going to see a major emphasis put on recruiting size, getting size in the transfer portal, finding a guy, obviously they don't grow on trees, but a guy like Yaxel Lendenborgs at the UABs and some of those more mid-tier, mid-major college basketball programs, finding those guys with size, NBA-type bodies, and bringing them in. I think that really just presents a unique challenge for teams, particularly at that college level, when guys are obviously a little bit younger. So I think we're going to see a huge emphasis. Obviously, it's not going away on the transfers. Upperclassmen, senior-laden, experienced transfer students. And then I think there's going to be a huge demand for size and bringing in as much talented size and shot blocking and shot influencing as teams can here going forward as we enter a portal season, which it's just nuts for these coaches. They were talking to Dusty May yesterday, and I believe it was Jeff Goodman asking him, I don't see all that much emotion from you right here and all of that. And it really was, he said, I believe he said, well, I've got to take this in, soak it in, and then prepare for next year's championship run. And I got to start focusing on recruiting and all that. 'Cause the portal, he said, is it 12:01 yet? The portal opens at 12:01. So he already had his eyes set on the portal. So just a crazy time in college basketball. It always is with recruiting, but particularly now with this transfer portal craziness, teams are going to go immediately from winning the national championship, losing in that national championship game, to bang, you coaches don't have a chance to really, truly soak that in and enjoy it. But you've got to then turn around and just go right into your next session of recruiting, getting in the transfer portal, making connections with guys that you're hoping to bring in for next year. So again, really, really cool for Michigan. Felt a little bit to me, last kind of thing I'll say on it before we move on to a couple other smaller topics, did feel a little anticlimactic in the sense of, I thought UConn, you'd seen some of these guys, Caravan and some of these guys for a handful of years, playing with UConn, playing on other teams, that have been fighting, trying to get to this spot, have won before. Obviously, Caravan has won 2 national championships. So a little bit of history with that team and that program and that coach and the consistency. Where Michigan, Dusty May, relatively new coach, 5 new players, 5 new starters on the team. These guys just met, like I said earlier, about 8-9 months ago. Maybe not met, but just started being teammates about 8-9 months ago. So there did feel a little bit of, there wasn't a ton of adversity for Michigan. They lost 1 game the entire season. There was never really that big, we've been through years and years of trials and tribulations together. It did feel a little bit more almost NBA super team-ish in the sense of, we got the guys together, we're supposed to win, and we did win. And there just wasn't that same emotion that you've seen from some past champions. So take that for what you will. Good, bad, indifferent, I don't know, but that was just something that I noticed. Felt a little anticlimactic, felt a little bit like there wasn't that big emotional build for this team like we've seen from some national champions in the past year. So just a little sidebar that I noticed from watching the game and watching the post-game celebration with Michigan. But again, huge shout out to the Wolverines. Congratulations to Dusty May and his squad. Also, as a Buffalo, New York native, I'll give a quick little shout out to Roddy Gale Jr., Niagara Falls high school product, an awesome player. I had a chance for my little brother and my younger cousins. I had a chance to play against him when he was in high school at Niagara Falls. Was a really, really dominant 8th grader that moved up to a really good varsity team in 8th grade. So had a chance to play with him when he was in the Buffalo area. So great shout out to Roddy Gale. Awesome game from him last night. A couple huge plays, a couple huge blocks and defensive stops. And just thought he provided a nice little spark and wanted to give my Western New York guy a little shout out there. So again, congratulations to the Michigan Wolverines, your 2026 national champions. Coach Dusty May is on the short list of current coaches who should be considered the best coach in the game right now. And again, that roster was one of the best that we've seen in recent years. Might be one of the best rosters that we see for a handful of years here going forward, despite all the NIL spending and things that we have going on. One of the unique dominant rosters that we've seen here in college basketball. So with that said, we're going to stay on the college basketball train. Big news that came out yesterday is the North Carolina coaching search is finally over. There's a ton of speculation between Tommy Lloyd at Arizona, Dusty May at Michigan. Would one of those types of guys be willing to leave a program that's in the Power 4, is pretty well funded NIL on an NIL front, and leave for one of those blue chip, blue prospect jobs like UNC? And clearly the answer was no. I think in the world of NIL right now, we are seeing that guys don't want to leave. If you go to a program like Tommy Lloyd at Arizona now, Dusty May at Michigan, we just saw, what more do you have to leave for? You just won a national championship. There might be a little bit more money on the other side of that fence, but you're making so much money at Michigan, at Arizona, at these schools that you're building, and you have a chance to build, and really, it's a little cliche to say you have a chance to be a legend at that university and on that campus, but you really do. We see it. I'm here in Spokane, Washington is where I live now, and there's no better example than Gonzaga's coach Mark Few has had a chance to build that program up from scratch, and I don't think Gonzaga is not Gonzaga if Mark Few leaves 5-10 years into his stretch here. Gonzaga is not the national power that it is known as. Mark Few is probably not the Mark Few that we know today if he leaves for a little bit more money. So a lot to be said for that. Long roundabout way for me to say that North Carolina has hired former Denver Nuggets NBA coach Mike Malone, who I truthfully think could be a pretty good fit for the college game. I think one of the things in the NBA that he was very, very successful, obviously won the 2023 NBA championship with Nikola Jokic and the Denver Nuggets there, had a 471 and 327 record as the Nuggets head coach, well above 500, and just again, another winning coach. I think what wore out his welcome in the NBA was that he was a little bit more like a traditional college coach in his high intensity. I think from what I've read, the way he wanted to practice, the way he spoke to his guys, again, not that he was a bad person or anything like that, but just had that old school way of going about things, which in the NBA, when you're dealing with guys that are professionals, that are making millions and millions and now hundreds of millions of dollars in today's NBA, that can wear thin and can fall on deaf ears eventually for guys in the NBA, particularly when you're championship. Maybe you got a little bit of leeway on that, but as soon as you start losing, have a losing season or two, that's going to wear thin in the NBA. And maybe is a little bit more applicable even to college now with the NIL, with the way that things work on the NIL front, with guys getting paid, guys leaving to go to what they view as better situations in the transfer portal. But I think that mentality that he has and coaching style is going to translate much better to the NCAA college basketball than it did in the NBA. And really my biggest thing for Malone that I think is going to be his biggest strength is that obviously Nikola Jokic is prime example. You have to give a lot of credit, obviously, to the players themselves for development. But the other part of that is there's got to be coaches in there working with them, knowing what they need to work on, what they need to get better at to be successful. So lots of credit to his players, but he's had Nikola Jokic, Christian Braun, Michael Porter Jr., all of whom Nikola Jokic was a second-round draft pick, Braun pick in the 20s, Porter Jr. in the mid-teens, even a guy like Jamal Murray, who's the 7th overall pick, not the top of your lottery, like a John Wall and some of the Kyrie Irving and some of those super highly touted prospects that were Anthony Davis's that were anticipated to be really, really good dominant guys. Even a guy like Jamal Murray at 7 was able to come into Denver under Coach Malone and really develop and blossom into the really, really great 2023 Denver Nuggets team that we saw win a championship. Some of those guys, Michael Porter Jr. being the only one actually, who has now left, go to different teams, but we see him averaging close to 30 points a game when he's healthy over there in Brooklyn. So again, I think Mike Malone is going to be huge on the development front, which now in the world of NIL is awesome because you bring in guys that are fit for your position, like we just talked about with Michigan, where you bring in those senior-laden guys, and then you can also still, with a guy that's good on development, recruiting, all of that, can still aim for some of those top high school prospects like the Cam Boozers, obviously Cooper Flags, these are all Duke guys, but those types of prospects that are freshmen coming in, you can aim for those, lean on his development of players to develop those guys, bring in the rest of a roster that is senior-laden, junior-laden, upperclassmen heavy with experience coming into the portal. And I think UNC has a chance to get right back to national relevance pretty quickly with Mike Malone there. I think last year was an anomaly for what we saw. But again, they are just 2.5, 3 years removed from playing in a national title game. So plenty of time and plenty of room for UNC to turn this thing around here. I think Mike Malone's going to do a great job there. I think he's going to be a great fit. Again, maybe not exactly what North Carolina fans were expecting when you were hearing the Tommy Lloyds and the Dusty Mays. But I think that Mike Malone is going to be a great fit there in Chapel Hill. So congratulations to the Tar Heel. Coaching search, the coaching search is now officially over, and they can start focusing on the transfer portal and recruiting just like the rest of these teams. So, and actually, before I get into my last little piece that I want to touch on here, something that just kind of popped in my head, I was thinking about this last night after watching the game, is that Dusty May reminds me in demeanor and everything a lot of Brad Stevens when Brad Stevens was at Butler. And with the money in college basketball and things like that now, I don't necessarily foresee Dusty May leaving Michigan. I certainly didn't see it for the North Carolina job, but maybe something to tuck into the back of your heads, keep on the radar, is are any NBA teams going to start coming for Dusty May after watching what he's done, not only at Florida Atlantic, but now at Michigan, winning the national championships, 2 Final Fours at those 2 schools. So he is a guy that I think with his demeanor, with the way that he relates to his players, does not seem like much of a barker, which again, like I was just alluding to, that seems to work better at the NBA level nowadays, having a guy that can come in, not be barking at the guys 24/7, but a little bit more of a relationship. Let's get to know you guys and we'll kind of talk through things and work on things together. I could see him really fitting into that mold and really having a ton of success. We just saw him build the roster that he built there at Michigan. So while he might not be having GM responsibilities or anything like that, you know that he can build a roster. You know that he can coach his butt off. So I don't necessarily think that Dusty May is leaving anytime soon. Probably definitely not now after winning a national championship, but just something to keep on your radars. We could see Dusty May on NBA teams' coaching radars here in the near future. I would not be shocked by that at all. So last thing I want to hit here is just one more men's college basketball topic. Was going through some of my old content from about this time last year. Iowa had just hired Ben McCollum, coming over from Drake, formerly at Northwest Missouri State, as we all got to learn during this tournament, coming from D2, along with Bennett Sturts, his player that was with him there at Northwest Missouri 2 at Division II, transferred up to Drake with him, went over to Iowa. And when that happened, I was so excited. I just believed in McCollum's coaching style so much, believed in Sturts as a player so much that I started this channel and I got on here and talked about the impact that was going to have and to keep them on your radar as a dark horse team going into this year. And then we saw the run that Iowa made. They went out and beat Florida, number 1 seeded Florida, and made it to the Elite 8. Hard-fought game with Illinois, had a chance to go to the Final Four, obviously fell a little bit short, but a magical run from Ben McCollum. So I started going through things. I wanted to try to find maybe a team and a coach that's coming in, new coach going to a high major school that could potentially have that type of impact, like Ben McCollum to Iowa. And again, I'm showing my little bit of Western/Central New York bias here, being originally from Buffalo, New York. But I do think Gerry McNamara from Siena was just hired as the new Syracuse head coach. I'm still waiting to get final word on some of these transfer portal moves. But it appears that Gavin Doty, coming from Siena, highly touted transfer guard in the portal, is almost assuredly going to be following his coach from Siena over to Syracuse down the I-90 there in New York, going to Syracuse. And McNamara's whole thing, we've seen some press conferences from here since he got announced as the head coach. Obviously, he was a member of that 03 national title team with Carmelo Anthony and a couple of those really good early 2000s Syracuse teams while he was in school. And I grew up in that area at that time. Syracuse basketball was the show in town in that area. It was just rocking. People paid attention. It was on in every household as they're making tournament runs and Big East tournament runs at the time and things like that. So from my childhood, from my teenage years, I miss when Syracuse basketball was good. And that's what Gerry McNamara has talked a ton about. He's talked about how part of the student experience there at Syracuse is having a basketball team that is good and allowing students and fans to come out and be a part of that experience. So again, a lot of work to do at Syracuse. It's been several years where they've just kind of been, for the P4 schools, just kind of in the gutter, a little bit in the basement, kind of in that college basketball purgatory type area, just not really going anywhere, not showing a whole ton of improvement as their seasons went on. So I think Gerry McNamara is somebody that is just an absolute definition of an absolute grinder when it comes to college coaching. He is going to work his butt off. He is going to be relentless day in, day out with his preparation with these players. And so I am super excited to see what he is possibly able to do there at Syracuse, another team to file away as a potential dark horse going into next year. May take a little bit of time. This could be a turnaround that I see maybe taking more like 2-3 years of a process to where it's a little bit more of a slow build. Obviously, I'd be perfectly happy with eating my words on that. Would love to see Syracuse come back to national prominence. And again, if they're able to bring Gavin Doty over with Coach McNamara from Siena, then I think there's a great chance of that, particularly given the retention of Donnie Freeman, who from all accounts, from what I've seen so far, no official news that I've seen, but should be returning. Leading scorer coming back, averaged 16.5 points a game, 7 rebounds a game last year for the Orange. He's going to be coming back. And again, McNamara, similar to what I talked about with Malone, one of the things that he's kind of shown and showcased both as a player and as a coach is that he's really great with personal development. And so I hope that with Donnie Freeman, he's able to take the talent that he has there, refine his game a little bit out of control at times this year, a little bit turnover heavy, so can hopefully maybe rein in some of those areas of his game, work on the shooting, a little bit of improvement on the outside jumper. And you could see Donnie Freeman as a player that gets talked about in the national conversation next year as one of our top All-American, third team type of guys. I could see him making that jump. So you have him, and then you have Keon Anthony, who's obviously the big name, Carmelo's son, who, according to Carmelo, from what I have seen, which I think is a pretty reliable source talking about his son, says there's no plans for Keon to leave. And Melo's actually, again, former teammate of Gerry McNamara, has come out and said that he is super excited for Keon to play for McNamara, thinks that McNamara is going to be able to get the best out of Keon. And we could see maybe a huge jump there, where I don't anticipate all of a sudden next year Keon Anthony is having a Carmelo Anthony 2003 freshman year-esque season. However, I do think we could see a huge jump to where he's averaging double-figure points, maybe 5, 6, 7 rebounds to go along with a handful of assists, and is a guy that is a key cog in their offense, if not an even bigger step, because I think that he has all of that talent there in Anthony, and now just needs a coach that is able to find the best way to get that out of him, put him in positions on the floor to best utilize the skills that he has as a scorer as well as a playmaker and just contributor overall to the offense. So super excited for Syracuse. Again, as I said, college basketball is just better when Syracuse is good. And so I think this is a huge move. A little bit of skepticism from circles from Syracuse from what I can see, because you never know when you're bringing in one of your own. That can go poorly. A guy like Gerry McNamara is revered in Syracuse history. So if this were to go sideways, what does that relationship look like? Always a little bit of a risk bringing in your own guy, but I think they made the right decision. I think GMAC is absolutely the right guy for that job. It felt like, who else were you going to go with there? I know there was talks of Bryant Hodgkins from South Florida, also a Buffalo area native. Didn't really appear that in his process, didn't appear that Syracuse was ever really a serious option for him. Looked like he was had his eyes set on Providence the entire time. So after Brian Hodgson, he was the main one that I saw. A couple other coaches that you see and you go, yes, they've had great success at the schools that they're at, but what sense do they make specifically for Syracuse? And none of them had that factor, obviously, as much as Gerry McNamara, just being right down the road now with Siena, about 2 hours down the road in Albany, New York, coaching there. It just made perfect sense. Bring him home. Hopefully he can bring Syracuse basketball back to national prominence, because again, as I've said, as your Western New York, Central New York homer, I went to school 45 minutes north at SUNY Oswego. I played basketball about 45 minutes north of Syracuse. So Syracuse basketball in the area where I'm from was the be-all, end-all for college basketball. So we need them to be good again. The country needs them to be good again. And I think Gerry McNamara is the guy that's going to bring them back to kind of that national prominence and back to that promised land of being a Final Four contender, a Sweet 16 contender again, just somebody that we see in the tournament that can make some noise any given year. So those are my thoughts for the days today, people, and that's about all I got. There's a handful of bigger transfer things that are going to be coming down the pipe, both on the men's and women's side. Again, transfer portal opened about 12 hours ago here today, so I have a full-time job that I haven't had a chance to really go through and get all of that information. So some of this stuff could be old news by the time you hear it. I hope it's not, but I will plan to check in later in the week. We'll talk a little bit of portal news, both on the men's and women's side, what's going on there. Follow the Audie Crooks situation on the women's side. Very interested to see where she ends up going in the portal, the #1 portal recruit right now for the women's side. And then we'll also, as we're approaching NBA playoffs, we'll talk a little bit of NBA as we're wrapping up regular season, getting into playoffs. And then our WNBA draft takes place next Monday, the 13th. So we'll get into some WNBA analysis, talk about the draft, and then as they get their season going, we'll cover all that's happening. So again, if you were here on YouTube with me, I really appreciate it. This is Below the Rim Basketball. I'm your host, Quinn Carey. Make sure you throw this video a like, subscribe to the channel. Comment down below, tell me where you think I'm totally wrong, where my take's crazy or stupid, or tell me what you agree with. And I'd just love to hear any and all feedback from you guys, and any engagement that I could get as I try to grow this page is greatly appreciated. So Thank you so much for taking the time with me here today. Go have a great rest of your day, and we will talk to you here later in the week.